Yeah.
We're waiting.
There we go. Now we're live.
Remember, though,
We might be. We could be
you
live.
don't want to say it too soon,
That's true.
Is that a
or the beginning
fact or
gets
is it
cut off.
truth?
We don't know.
Fact
right.
or truth? That's our new
That's it.
podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they're not the same. Anyway, sorry.
Okay. This is Literary Roadhouse. One short story once a week. I'm Anais.
I'm Gerald.
I'm Andy.
All right. And this week we read Emergency by Denis Johnson. It's a short story that was part of Johnson's critically acclaimed anthology Jesus' Son, which was later adapted into a 1999 film. But here's why my voice is going up. Because the cast was Billy Crudup, Samantha Morton, Dennis Leary, Jack Black, Dennis Hopper, and Holly Hunter. What? I didn't know short story anthologies can get that kind of pull. Anyway, also in the movie, Denis Johnson makes a cameo as a guy with a knife in his eye, which brings us to this week's story. So, the story follows a narrator whose only given name is the nickname Fuckhead, which apparently is his recurring name throughout the anthology. Fuckhead and his co-worker Georgie and friend work at a local hospital. Fuckhead is a clerk and Georgie is an orderly. Georgie steals pills from the hospital, not knowing what they are, and he and Fuckhead take pills, are high just about always, and sleep in Georgie's truck. It's unclear if either of them has a home. You get the sense that they might, but it might not be much better than the truck. Late in the summer of 1973, Fuckhead has only been working there for about 3 weeks. It's 3:30 in the morning, and a man walks in with a knife in his eye. His wife stabbed him through the eye, but he can still see. The blade reached into his brain. His left hand isn't really responding. Doctors and nurses that are tending to the man are unsure of what to do. They want eye and brain specialists. Anyway, Georgie, who is super high and like moments ago was having a whole crazy hallucinogenic moment, mopping up an ER, just goes and pulls the knife out of the guy's eye. And he's fine. The guy is fine. You can see his hands responding now. He's fine. No long-term damage. Great. Georgie and Fuckhead go on a bender. They go to a country fair. They see a guy who's famous for pushing LSD. They hit a pregnant rabbit and try and fail to save her unborn bunnies. They stumble upon a drive-in movie theater in an early autumn snowstorm. They sleep in Georgie's truck, and the next day pick up a hitchhiker named Hardy. He's a young guy who Fuckhead knows who had wound up in Texas and was moving north to get to Canada to dodge the draft. Georgie resolves to help Hardy get to Canada. Hardy asks Georgie what he does for a job, and Georgie says, save lives.
Boom.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Right. Ask a question.
I was going to say, Gerald, you seem like you're itching to say what you think of the story overall.
Am I itching to say that? I'm itching to say I hadn't got a clue what was going on with this story. It was very entertaining. It's I don't know what it's like even, but it was very entertaining. I enjoyed the reading of it. I enjoyed the second reading of it as well. I just didn't know what the point of it all was. It was very, very strange. And if it was written from the perspective of someone who's not quite all there because of pills and drugs and God knows what else. So it's entertaining, but I can't say I had any sort of deeper feelings for it.
Okay. Andy, what did you think?
I suppose the best way to sum up my thoughts regarding this story is
No,
just
that's so harsh.
it's like I could see the things that it was doing. I was like, okay, you're doing those things, sure. I don't know, whatever. Deep and insightful insight and addiction. Like I don't. Yeah, but like, what are we doing? It's just a series of disconnected anecdotes and simulated drug trips. I don't know. It was dumb. I could have done something better with my life instead of reading this. And
Wow.
Jack Black did not appear in this short story.
What? Oh, no, but he's in the film adaptation.
Well,
right?
sure. So why didn't we just at least watch the film and then Jack Black would be there?
I don't understand. Anyway, I I don't know. Okay, you're just trying to give something a 2. Last week you were like, I've never given a story a 2, and you're just out here trying to give something a 2. I'm on to you.
I did think, man, you know what? This would be a good time to give something a 2. But look,
Yeah,
no
okay,
spoilers.
I see you. I'm seeing you.
No,
calling
it
you
was
out.
dumb. It was dumb. It wasn't anything special other than this thing that it is. And like, okay, maybe he was one of the early people to write this thing, but like, I don't know. Nor do I care.
I mean, I think he does a lot of things right. So I don't completely disagree with you guys. I just think you're like, that's a lot. That's really far. Like, to me, it's a really evocative picture of despair, drug addiction, escapism. I find myself wincing all the time, which was strange because the story's supposed to be funny. Like, he writes the story like he thinks he's making jokes. And I think there was a time when it was funny because when I was reading like reviews, critical reception, people's reactions in the 90s when this came out, people were like, it has such a dry humor. And I'm like, to who? Who thinks who's like, ha ha ha. The guy says only call the cops if I die. I mean, it's just like when the guy who gets stabbed by his wife. So it says something to me about the where society is and how stories age. Like in the 90s, people were just like, oh, it's got like this grim, dark humor. I'm like, great, 90s must have been fucking awesome. Because now all I'm thinking is like, basically, we're at a time where despair, drug addiction, escapism is like at an all-time high in the US. Like the drug of choice just keeps getting worse and worse. Now it's like fentanyl with horse tranquilizer and people's limbs are falling off. Like the despair is peak right now. So I'm there's no jokes for me because all I see on the margins of this is just like total suffering and I'm just wincing the whole time. But one of the things about it in terms of like its artistry that it does well is it kind of makes sense that the narrator who is deep in this has to give this like veneer of a dry humor to everything to basically survive. He's not basking in it. He has to live in it. So there's this sort of cavalier's not the quite word, but just like he's taking a lot of things in stride that the rest of us would not take in stride. And the only clues to that is like the family who speeds off when they're like, the rabbit had bunnies, or the family service doctor who just like is worn out. But everyone else in the story has a lot of despair. Even Nurse, who basically does not want to get involved and just wants to protect her family and is checked out and jaded. And Hardy, who is dodging the draft and was already basically like a drifter before that. So there's just like a lot of despair. And then as I was feeling this, as I was just like, there's a lot of things that I get that it does right. I like that the narrator's voice stays very, very consistent. Like there was a section where the narrator tried to get poetic, but it's a guy who's like on drugs all the time and not like, right? So he goes, the day had been dry and hot, the buck pines and the what all simmering patiently. Like this is him doing a description, like whatever. This is right. Like there's like limits to the way the narrator can speak and express himself and describe what's happening around him when telling the story. So I liked all of that consistency. But then I found this woman, critic Sandy English. This was a review that I found about her like review of Jesus' Son, and I agreed very strongly. So basically, I'm just going to read what she said, which was, overall, the character is not engaging, and the life depicted here is not that intriguing. The writing effectively reflects the adult thoughts of adult people existing in another world. Johnson recognizably and articulately identifies that netherworld. But after a number of decades and much more poisoning of youth by opioids and other substances, one wants fiction to have a broader sweep about and understanding of the issues. And that's basically what I'm that. Like, he does a very good job describing this. And it feels very true. But I don't see the ha ha ha. Oh God,
I
it's very
think it's very, very. I think both your opinion and that piece you read out is very, very good because it's not funny anymore, is it? I think that's the thing.
Yeah.
And this was probably, pretty amusing back in the day. People high and just not knowing what was going on, and guy just takes the knife out of somebody's eye. There you go, that's done. Why not? So it is. I mean, it's really well written. As I said, I enjoyed reading it, and you know, I didn't enjoy trying to catch on to the thread, and there wasn't really a thread, is there? It's just an or a showing of how life was for this particular guy, and how things seemed to him, and how nothing seemed to have any sort of seriousness or any depth. It was just experience. This is what happened, and this is something else that happened, and you never sure. Like, you know, he squashes the baby chickens. Oh, I just squashed the baby chickens. Yeah, whatever. It's like there's nothing. So I suppose that successfully describes how he felt. He's inert. He's isolated from feelings about what's going on around him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it does do the like good short story thing of like the ending where Georgie says it saves lives, then makes you go back and reflect on the rest of the story a little bit more, and you're like, oh, Georgie is the one saving. If he's still just as high, but he's the one who saves Terrence. He's the one who tries to save the bunnies, and you get the sense that he might even be in a way saving the narrator once you see it in like you look at it in retrospect, because yeah, the narrator's doing drugs and he's out of it. But he's sleeping in Georgie's truck. Georgie's driving him around. He's the one who's like emphatically saying we need to get Hardy to Canada. And then there's this moment where Georgie wants to go to church instead of the county fair. And like the story could be cynical enough where both religion or the county fair is like an equal amount of escapism. But if you see Georgie as the person who tries to save people and do good, who is most upset by the despair seeing around him, like all the blood in the operating room that he's seeing, even though it's not there, then maybe church is its traditional symbol of like being salvation, which is interesting. Yeah, and I think even when this came out, the despair was there, the drug addiction was there. I think maybe we just weren't so saturated in it where you could say this is a small minority of people who ended up here in some way and they're finding some humor in it and that makes it okay. Where now we're like, I guess there's just been more discourse about it and we're just like, this is awful, like really bad. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so many of us have been touched by addiction of one sort or another, and at no point is any of it amusing, and it just you just think, oh gee, yeah, it's like I said before about the sort of dreary "this is my life" sort of stories that Annie's particularly doesn't like, and it's it just I'm not. Yeah, I'm not amused by this. I'm not really entertained. I'm entertained by how it was written, and I liked that, and it was, you know, bang, bang, bang. This has happened, and that happened, and that happened, but yeah, not for me really.
Yeah, I guess copyright 1992 is relevant,
and
it doesn't feel the same anymore at all.
Mm-hmm.
Remember the 90s though? They were wild.
Yeah, we're 31 years later. And
wow.
We're like, yeah, this has gotten a lot worse. That's basically our takeaway.
How can we be 31 years on from 1990?
I can't. I know. It's yeah. Yeah, I was listening to a podcast where a full-grown adult woman says she was born in like 2000 or 2002 or something, and the podcast host goes, "Get the fuck out." It's like, no, you're not allowed. Out.
That's good.
Yeah.
I was talking about the Chinese zodiac once with a friend of mine, and he said he was born in the year of the rat. And I said, well, that's impossible. I was born in the year of the rat, and we're not the same age. He goes, yeah, but it's on a cycle. It repeats. It's like a 12-year cycle. You're not 12 years younger than me. He goes, well, I was born in 1996. I was like, oh, I see. Leave.
Yeah. Get out. You're not allowed to be here anymore. That's how I feel. Leave. Yeah.
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 Yes. Yeah. We've got some soccer. We've got some soccer games going on this weekend in the big sort of annual cup competition thing. And one of the commentators, who's a young guy, retired and is now a commentator, said that he had already retired before one of the players on the pitch was born, and they just go, "Well, no, it's yeah, it's crazy."
Yeah.
So
Why is
yeah,
this happening? Time.
31
Stop.
years. 31 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I feel like we've been really, really negative. And in terms of the writing of the story, there were a
Yeah.
lot of things I liked. There were some great, brilliant like dialogue moments. The way he handled the like angels breaking through the snowstorm and then it's the drive-in movie theater. Like that whole sequence was very well done. I thought it was like he had I felt like the writer had good control of what was going on, where he disorients you just right, but catches you before you get frustrated, or at least that was my experience. Disorientation is intentional because it's a drug, it's a high, but then catches you before you're like, I don't know what the fuck's going on, right? Like
Mm.
it was very skillful.
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing I highlighted when they were out in the truck, and it said, listen to the big rigs going from San Francisco to Pennsylvania along the interstate like shudders down a long hacksaw blade. I thought so. Some lots of nice little bits, and as I said, the reading of it was good, and it's just this wild ride in somebody's head that I was like an unwilling passenger in this story.
Right. It's a skillful wild ride in somebody's head where you don't want to be.
Yeah.
And it doesn't reward you for being there in the end.
Yeah, I do think it's a time thing though. Like I do think, which probably, speaks well of progress on, how we think about addiction and despair. But right, because it's really hard to find anything with addiction funny now, but it wasn't the case then. Like, isn't Fear and Loathing? I think Fear and Loathing is older than this. Isn't Fear and Loathing like kind of all supposed to be like a kind of funny romp?
Yep.
Like it has
right.
Oh, right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it has darkness and other stuff in it too. I think there was never a time people were like, addiction's great. Like that, we're not saying that. It was not like in the 90s, people didn't know addiction's bad, but there was like this room where you could escape how bad it was. You didn't have to confront it. You could make light of it in some ways, right? Because like it still sucks to be these people. There was never a time where it didn't suck to be these people. But the fact that they seem to be having a good time made it okay to laugh with them. Where now it's like, I don't believe you when you say you're having a good time.
Yeah.
And I can't laugh with you.
Well, and it's also the thing where these are like semi-autobiographical, right? So ultimately the point of view person is someone who survives and becomes a novelist. So
Is that true in Johnson's case? I'm not sure. Maybe I didn't look that part
yeah.
up. But
I think it's semi-autobiographical.
But if that's the case, you're right, where it's like
Right.
that person also has to tell the story this way. Like
Right.
Yeah, you have to tell the story this way. And I think that's fine. And I think if you see it that way, it's like I can appreciate the very accurate portrait and the way he got us there and the skill in writing it. Yeah. I definitely like it, I think, more than you guys do, but
yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, you're right there. I think it's if you bear in mind the author's history, then yeah, it's I suppose it shows us into a world which many of us, speaking personally, many of us have no idea of what goes on and what can go on. So I suppose in that case, but it's tainted with the sort of rather sort of messy backdrop that now, as we've said, means something is quite different to how it did 31 years ago.
Yeah.
31 years. I'm not having that.
I don't think you cast Jack Black in this movie in 2023. No. Yeah. Also, there was one piece of dialogue I really liked, which was between the nurse and the family service doctor. The family service doctor that nobody liked came in looking for Georgie to wipe up after him. Where's Georgie? This guy asked. Georgie's in the OR, nurse said. Again? No, nurse said. Still doing what? Cleaning the floor. Again? No, nurse said. again. Still, like that
Yeah.
little. I liked it. Yeah.
And,
There was another sentence. It'll be fine. Yeah.
and the whole thing about the combat knife in the eye sort of thing is sort of, if you view it through a different lens, you can see it's amusing, and you see it's amusing that Georgie just pulls it out when they're rushing around to get the right sort of doctors and gas man and everything to operate, and he just pulls it out. So I can see that there's a sort of humor there.
Yeah, everything with the guy with the knife in his eye is a bit. Like the guy comes in.
Well, and the guy's fine at the end also. Not to
Right,
cut
he's-
you off.
Yes, he's fine at the end. Yeah, but it's a whole bit. He comes in. Who brought you in? Nobody. I walk down. It's only 3 blocks. We'd better get you lying down. Okay, I'm certainly ready for something like that. Like this is a bit. The whole thing.
Yes.
But also domestic
And the-
violence is less funny now.
and the fact his other eye was a glass eye or a plastic eye or something, or artificial eye.
Yes.
Is
Yes.
it's you can see there's it. You could see it was probably funny at the time.
Yeah.
the
that's
dark
it.
humor. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's also a bit that Georgie, the high orderly, takes out the knife when all of the doctors and nurses are dithering about, being like, "Oh my god, we need a specialist," and he just does it. It has that classic like, "Oh, screw them," not screw them, but like, I could have been a doctor, right? But then drug addiction happened. This is the part where we're all wincing, like yeah. I think Georgie does say that at one point where he's like, he could have been a doctor or something.
Yeah, something. There's something like that.
Yeah.
Yes. I dialed the hospital operator and told to get me the eye man and the brain man and the gas man. I think it's quite. That's.
Yeah.
There's a sort of wit to it.
Yep. And they don't call him the anesthesiologist, but
The
gas man sounds like farts.
Yes. So there's that.
Fart doctor.
Yeah.
I also
Yeah.
feel like I should have highlighted them, but when I was noticing this, I was like lying in bed. But like, there's certain sentences that the way that they're written, the syntax, it's a very particular way of people speaking that we're all familiar with. And I think about this sometimes when I read older works where like it takes me a second to wrap my head around the way that a sentence is written because it's supposed to be conversational for that time period, which makes me wonder, like, let's add another 30 years, another 60 years. Would it be as easy to read? Like there were certain sentences where I'm like, this grammatically, it just requires understanding the way that people speak for the sentence to have the right cadence in your head, or else you get lost. I want to find one of them. I remember stopping, going, "Huh."
Huh.
Yeah,
Yes.
like, okay.
That's an appropriate response. Huh.
Yeah, I want to see if I can find one. But I always find that interesting when I like notice that there's certain sentences where it's or just something's very conversational and it really relies on the audience being somebody who grew up enough hearing that to be able to make sense of it. Like somebody for whom English is a second language, or they haven't consumed a lot of like English media. If you consume a lot of English media, you'll be fine. But if you don't, then it might be hard because it doesn't really follow in a linear way. I think it's when Hardy shows up. Anyway.
I was just
Here's
going
a
to ask
fun-
Andy if he trimmed his beard for his job. Now he's gone all sensible and
Not for my
Whatnot.
job as such.
no, it's very smart.
Yeah. I've been
Still
going to
full.
a new barber, and I was just like, yeah, just make it look good. And then he did. So I was like, all right.
Ah, nice. Okay, sorry, it was just a distraction while Annie
Yeah.
was looking
Fair enough.
for the.
You know what I found
Yeah.
out as a piece of
Mhm.
biographical trivia about Dennis Johnson?
Mm.
Go on.
Studied under Raymond Carver.
Mm.
Oh, really?
That made me think of Gerald.
It's a Carve magazine, of course.
Carve magazine.
Mhm.
Hooray! I did. It's sort of. I didn't, but somewhere in the back of my head is Carve magazine makes print stories. No, get back, get back. I think I have to leave it a few more months
before you.
Just me with the New Yorker. Don't just keep going to the New Yorker. There's other places.
Yeah, and I think
I cheated
we have
with
to
this
check.
one.
We have to check in occasionally because just in case things have changed and people have suddenly realised that they can't write the same old shit time after time. Because, no disrespect, of course, but the same old stuff.
Yeah.
So what about this one, Anise? You said something.
Oh, that I cheated.
Just you.
Yeah, I don't just do the New Yorker, but this short story was published before the full anthology in the New Yorker in 1991, but then it was, with permission, reprinted in Narrative. So I got it from Narrative, so I technically cheated. But it's old enough and it's taught in so many classes. It's like a standard classic short story.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
It's taught in writing courses.
Yeah.
And I can see why. Like, it's really good at sticking to a particular voice throughout the entire thing, which we take for granted because we read a lot of short stories by writers. But we read one a few weeks ago where I was like, this voice makes no sense. Remember, I think it was the Bottle Girl one. But yeah. And even when writing descriptions or like the trucks on the interstate with the hacksaw, like that choice of analogy has to make sense for this character, like all those little kinds of things that are in there, a lot of the diction, the word choices, like it's really good for that. And just like painting a portrait of something where the characters themselves aren't seeing the full picture the way the reader might. So yeah, really good for all of that.
Yeah, and I suppose the reliability of the author's of the character's voice comes from the fact that it's probably the author's voice. It's the author's sort of recollections or feelings or experiences. I may be doing him a disservice, but
no, I think it's good for authors to do it on their voice, but your first draft is still garbage because you still don't know what you're saying. So you're saying it in your voice, maybe, but you're rambling. So like you still need to edit it. You still need to tighten it. Yeah. So still not a disservice. Still takes work to get here.
Yeah. So there we go. So we've done it justice, I think.
Yeah.
You've done it justice.
We rate it?
We could. I don't know. Maybe.
I feel like I may have convinced Andy it's not a 2, and he'll have another week where he doesn't give something a 2.
I don't think he's so easily swayed.
No, he might be. Let's find out.
He's got that look.
It's possible he would have until I said it. Now he's got to go with a 2 just to spite me.
So I'm giving it a 2.
See? The spite. There's a spite
no,
too.
Just I don't know. Anais, you made some real good points, but I feel ultimately the biggest point is like I don't care, and I've said this before and I'll say it again, I'm sure. Oh, what a skillfully done piece of shit.
Wow.
Great talent and skill. I've crafted this perfect thing
important.
that Andy does not care about in the slightest.
Well, maybe you should care.
And no, I shouldn't.
The way something's written is super important.
Yeah, but like if you're polishing a turd, it doesn't matter how much polish you use.
All right. Well, it's not a turd. Agree to disagree. But all right. I'm gonna come in with a 4.5. The 4.5 week. Yep.
I don't know. No, I'm going with Andy. I'm giving it a 2. I'm not.
Wow.
I did enjoy reading. Yeah, I did.
Yeah,
no, it's 3. Sorry, it's a 3.
Yep.
It's a 3 because I enjoyed the
fair.
reading of it, and I admired the skill of the author for creating this turd, which he then polished.
You know what I feel like is I enjoyed a lot of the reading of it, and then it stopped, and I was like,
yeah. What and if I sort of finished, I thought, what was that?
Right.
That was good, but what was it? Yeah.
All right. Well, try again next week. Gerald, what are we reading this week?
Or in a few weeks' time. We are next time, which is going to be after a little bit break. We're going to be reading The Good Room by Bill Cotter.
Okay. Oh, I didn't do the outro. I knew this. All right. But before you go, tell us your drug of choice in our Facebook discussion group, the Literary Roadhouse Readers. We'd love to hear about your crazy and totally hilarious trips in the 70s. Next, I do iTunes review. Doing it on the fly. Look at this, guys.
Just wing it, Denise.
Yeah. Help people find us before they lose both of their eyes by leaving a review on iTunes. Tell your friends and support our podcast on patreon.com/literary roadhouse. Every bit helps. And as always, share this with the nurse who you describe as fat and quivering. Totally chill. Until next time, read a good story.
Yay.